So in doing like different conversations and interviews, talking to white men in particular, right? I think that from what they have shared, they feel there is an attack on being a white male in general, right? This idea that being a white male is wrong. I mean, you guys do know that's been happening, right? I mean, that there has been that narrative. Okay, am I here alone? Okay. So they feel that is something that's being attacked, because that is a lot of the conversation when we talk about history, and we talk about especially like slavery, the civil rights, right? And that being a white male is kind of being attacked right now. So I think some of that need to defend is this idea that, well, I happen to be born this way. I don't know. And, so I think that comes the question of, is it possible for us to acknowledge history without being connected to, like, you don't have to necessarily be connected to it to acknowledge that something took place. And I feel right now there's this disconnect from being able to say, I can acknowledge that happened. I was not related to that person. I did not do that. But right now we don't even have people being able to acknowledge that something took place. And I think that's where some of the question comes from is, can we at least do that? So Kevin, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think in that context, sometimes I feel like we may be standing on different islands. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're close enough we can see each other, but there's something keeping us apart. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes what that something is, and I'm going to use my experience of what I know. Often when I'm talking about history, I'm often talking about it through the lens and experiences of my family, as well as how those past experiences continue to either shape my experience or shape those experiences that I'm going to engage in the future. And so when we think about whether or not it's Black people in the United States, I wasn't around when my great-great-great-grandfather was enslaved. However, I still have to engage in the same things that my great-great-great-grandfather had to engage in, or be taken or not allowed to have some of the privileges that people who may have come into the country after my great-great-great-father and had a whole different role. And so when we try to explain these models of why things happen, I feel like this is when it's like, well, I wasn't there. And it's like, well, I wasn't there either. But nonetheless, today, my experience and your experience may be different because of that past history. And how do we get to a point to at least acknowledge that these components led to this? Now, we've had so much data. We've had so many stories. We've had oral histories, in terms of how experiences transfer to future generations. But there's a denial there. And I think that denial is connected to also not wanting to recognize the history. And so I think there's like this limitation of like, I'm gonna understand history to this point, but the moment that you say that those past experiences have anything to do with my life today, I don't wanna be a part of it. And so that's where I often sometimes feel challenged in those conversations, because I don't feel like I get the privilege to say, my great-grandfather, I wasn't there, but I know nonetheless what the statistics are for Black men, even with 2 master's degrees in this area, for trying to find a job. I know what it says about maternal health for Black women after all these generations. And we need to be able to explain those experiences, because they don't just happen overnight. Like, there was a whole history that led to Black maternal health. Well, not a whole history, it kind of started immediately once we got here, but in terms of the declines in births and things like that. So that's what I appreciate
that. Did you want to say something, Alex? Then we're going to move to the next question.
Couple of things quickly. This year we celebrate 250th anniversary of America's independence, and I proudly became an American by choice. I wasn't born one. 250 years is a long time here, but where I grew up in Europe, that's yesterday, kind of. Bulgaria, for example, spent 500 years enslaved by the Turks. 500 years almost. And that put Bulgarians for many generations after liberation in 1878 at a huge disadvantage compared to other European countries. Do I hold any resentments because of this? No, I was born 100 years after that. And so I don't think that Bulgarians and people in Turkey should see each other because of such historical events as enemies, and one demanding the other to make some kind of restitution because of all the missed opportunities, because of the kind of atrocities that were perpetrated, the looting, the raping, the stealing of the male children to be raised as Muslim fanatics to fight for the Sultan. None of this should affect us today. Okay, if anything, Christians should know how to put the past behind us. And that's even past that we didn't live. We learn about it. But it's important for us to know about all of these things. And I see in a couple of places where we make the mistake of not telling the people what actually happened and leaving the people alone to make their own minds and how they perceive it and what they make of this, what they think about it. We kind of do the opposite. We tell in history classes our children, this is how you should feel about something. And you turn on the TV or find any kind of media today, and they are telling you how to feel, how to perceive things, and then you are left to decide whether it actually happened. Okay? The job of the history teacher, the job of the real journalist is to tell us what happened and leave it at that. And we have to make up our minds about what it means and how we should see it and evaluate it.
I've heard you say sometimes we should just be able to put the past behind, but it's really hard to put the past behind when you have a lot of mess right in front of your face. A lot of mess and fear. A lot of people are fearing what's happening as it relates to history or telling the story of history because of what's happening even in the political world. A lot of people are being silenced because you will instantly be labeled or targeted because you spoke up for a certain cause, a certain race. So it's just really hard to put the past behind when we're faced with a lot of things. So I think in order to move forward, we have to teach, and I use this loosely, teach tolerance, but at the same time, understand that you can't fear the things you can't conquer. You shouldn't fear the things that you can't conquer. If that makes sense to you. We have to try to conquer things and teach people how to have enough emotional intelligence to deal with situations when we're having those tough conversations that nobody wants to talk about or they make you uncomfortable. I think about the story that you said with your mother being a teacher. She's teaching history and telling factual things that happen, but then we're fearful now because we can get caught up in legal things as educators because you used the wrong term. You could be sued because somebody identified as a certain gender and they was born a different gender. So it's that fear that's before us, and that's why I say we can't get past the past because we got so much mess in front of us.
And thank you for that. And there's ways for us to, and this is a question, are there ways for us to move forward and still honor the past? Like, are there ways for us to still move forward out of the past? Because, I always find it interesting because I was talking to someone in preparation for this, and one thing that they asked me to bring up was how with 9/11, right? Everybody remembers 9/11. You remember where you were. I know I do. I remember exactly where I was when I got the phone call about it and was told to turn on the TV, okay? And people honor that and recognize that every year. People still, mourn about it. They're pretty, very valid in doing that. People also honor the Holocaust, right? And so the question was, why is it that other denominations, groups of people are told to just let go of the past when everybody else kind of, still honors the tough things that happened in their past? Because I know when, people bring up slavery or they bring up the civil rights era, people say, well, just, leave that in the past. You're not there anymore. And a lot of us are not in certain spaces that we were before, but is there a way for us to still move forward together, but also honor what took place in our lives?
Okay, so I want to take one step back and just say, part of the issue I think we have with history sometimes is that we don't actually know what history is. And I didn't until I was in grad school. I'm like in classes to get a PhD, and I was like, oh, because the way we teach it when folks are younger doesn't necessarily convey what history is, because we tend to teach it like these things happen in the past, memorize this stuff, learn the basics about everything that happened, and you're good. But that's not actually what history is, and that's not really what the historian does. And I think we wind up in this mess because we have a lot of different forces coming together. So history is actually our best interpretation of our human past. This is my most simple definition. It's our best interpretation. So there is always some element of making meaning of what happened in order to understand how we got here. Why are we here? What are we doing here right now? So that is always a part of what we're doing. The events that happened, that's just the past. And we're going to always have various interpretations of it, because like a really brief analogy is like we all go to, well, actually, let's use this room. We're all here right now on this date, this time, doing the same Breaking Bread Village event. But my perspective sitting right here at the end of the table is different than Tiffany's sitting at that end of the table, different than Aaron's being in the middle, different than yours being in the front row, different than yours being in the back row. Every single person who's asked what this event was like is going to tell the story differently. But the facts are we were all here right now in the same place. So that event happened. That's just the fact of it. This will become a past event that can be referenced. But what this event means is going to be different. So a historian needs to investigate all of those perspectives and bring it together.
Right now, do you agree that we are having a difficult time talking about the thing that took place? Like you just brought up this event. Mm-hmm. We are having a difficult time acknowledging that this event took place. Some people would say this never happened, right? I think that is.
Yes, I agree that but there are certain things that are just factual. They took place, right? Like this took place.
I agree with you. Mm-hmm. And my point is that right now it seems like people are having some difficulties coming to an understanding that the event took place, period. Even past all the other nuances, right? That people are saying, well, that didn't happen. At all.
Yeah, and the way they do it is by trying to apply a different meaning, right? It's like, so they're saying, well, okay, so maybe that happened. Maybe, I don't know. Give me an example. No.
Well, I was just going to say, like, historically, I actually don't think there's a ton of, like, factual disagreements in a lot of this stuff. Like, well, I guess I need specific examples. Like, so if you say, did we write a Declaration of Independence? There is not a disagreement on that. Why?
But when you say we, who are the we you're talking about?
Did the United States? Did the founding fathers write the Declaration of Independence?
Who are the founding fathers?
Well, okay, but that's what I'm getting to.
Yeah. The
factual part of it, then it's why did they do it? And the why, some of it's a simplistic, they wanted freedom. Partially true. Some of it is they're landowners trying to protect their rights. Some of it is they're anti-tax radicals that don't want somebody overseas taxing. All that stuff can be true. Now, how much each of it is true, that's the debate. And that's where you do have this big wide-ranging discussion.
Yeah. Wait. I want Camden to come here because y'all are tag teaming down here, and Camden, I want you to say something. And I want you to say something. Go ahead.
Well, my response to that is, why can't it all be true? And like looking at it, I'm going back to my IA because I spent 2 months writing this. This has been a long endeavor, 2,000 word paper. I'm so grateful it's done. But specifically, International Baccalaureate looks for you to, there's in the rubric it says, you need to analyze different perspectives in this paper, what's looked at, and like the idea of what the historian does with this. And so specifically for mine about the Black Panthers, the state looked at it as, I'm protecting my citizens from these people walking around with loaded weapons. But the Black Panthers viewed it as, I'm reclaiming a right that wasn't given to me in the 18th century. Because to give a little bit of history, if you are unsure who the Black Panthers were, they were founded on armed self-defense and using the fact that knowledge is power, understanding the Constitution, knowing their rights. And so all of these different perspectives, no one's necessarily wrong. It's the idea of kind of looking at what is all the perspectives that we have and how can we make meaning from this. And you bring up 9/11, I just think like, I was born in 2008, so I was not alive during that experience. And I think it's, I think it's just so interesting for me because, you know, I've been in my history classes. I've been taught about the Holocaust dozens of times. We celebrate 9/11 every year. I've been in school. And it's so interesting to me right now, watching the world the way it is and wondering, what am I going to be asked when I'm your guys' age, who are the rest of on the table? No. I don't mean like that. But like, just like 9/11, all that stuff. But like, I got to ask my parents, where were you? And I think about when I have kids, they're probably going to ask me, what was your COVID like? What was it like during, what was the political stance?
And she'll be like, that never happened.
I know. That's something we can all say. But I just, this question just is so meaningful to me because it's so interesting to hear from all of you guys who have had all these experiences and looking forward to the experiences that I'm going to have in the future with this.
Yeah. I appreciate that. So I want to. Okay. I'm sorry. I want to move to, you were drinking. I want to move on because we are limited on time, and I want to let the audience know we will have a portion for you all to ask questions or give commentary as well. There is this question because right now, I think about, to Camden's point, what will people say about us 50 years from now? What will they say about the way we treated each other, our humanity, how we see each other, right? And how we had empathy for each other or compassion for each other. And so my question first is, do you think that we are repeating patterns because we have not fully faced the history, right? And so I'm a very transparent person. I love to talk about real things. I love to talk about it in all honesty, like give it to me, right? People that are passive aggressive, I don't do well with them. Like, I don't know what you're really trying to say. And so say what you have to say and I'm good with that. With that said, do you feel like we are repeating things right now because we won't be honest about what took place on all? And listen, I know this is Black History Month, but this is about all type of history, right? All type of history, in my opinion, should be shared. It should be talked about. It should be honored or evaluated, however you want to look at it. But do you all think that we are repeating things because we won't just be honest about what took place before us?
I'll start.
Yeah, please.
Yes, history is repeating itself, and part of it because of the silence. Silence does not erase history. Cycle back to what you were saying. Like, some people will debate whether or not this event took place, and everybody have a different perspective. But when we choose not to tell the full story, and I'll cycle to education because that's my world. When we choose not to tell the truth or the full story that happens in education, the good, the bad, and even the things that are uncomfortable, we risk kind of institutionalizing things, and it creates a lot of inequity. But we claim we've moved beyond that, but we really haven't. For example, and I know you said it's not just about Black history, but I think about education, the Brown versus the Board of Education. We often celebrate the student integration, but we remain silent about the tens of thousands of Black educators who got pushed out of the profession because of the desegregation. And I'm still feeling it today because it's no secret. I work in human resources in a public school setting, and I still struggle with trying to recruit people of color. So we're feeling that today. So I feel like history constantly repeating itself. It's just showing its face in a different way. This is not ancient history. but it's history and it's repeating itself. It's just manifesting itself in a different way.
And I appreciate you saying that because I last year learned about the Brown versus Kin Board of Education. Thank you. I didn't even learn about that, like the teachers that got pushed out. So like, thank you for sharing that because that's new information to me, and we learned about that last year. So really, thank you for that.
Speaking of the way we interpret the events that we know happened, I'm a big soccer fan, like most people outside of the United States who grew up outside. My team, the one I support, and we're 10 points ahead this season. First place so far. The team is called Levski, named after the greatest, according to the typical narrative in Bulgaria, hero who fought against the Turkish regime and lost his life. Now, if you go to Bulgaria and people know about Levski, everybody knows, he's a hero. But if you go to Turkey and if you find people who still remember him, they will remember him as a terrorist. Okay, so it depends on which side of the conflict you were on. That gives you the perspective on what he did. Was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy? When I mentioned leaving the past behind us, all I meant was, as a Christian, holding no grudges for something that happened before you were born. Somebody did something to someone. Well, you're not at fault here. Even if some of those people on whichever side were somehow related by blood to you. But it's important to keep the memory. As you point out, we don't want to forget what happened because, well, if you forget history, as they say, you're likely to repeat it. Yeah. The bad things that happened in the past, because human nature never changes, we are going to do again unless we keep that memory alive.
I wanted to add a little on that and back to your previous question, because now some of what Tiffany said, like, to the extent that these things affect the present, correct. We got to talk, and we're talking about the present now. But I wanted to add to Alex's point in that there are things that are true about history, that are absolutely true, and you're absolutely right. And the communists did terrible things to his family and his country, and our country did terrible things to black people and to brown people. All that is true, and then but what does that mean, and how do we respond to it? And this is not a new discussion. This is the W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington discussion. This is the Malcolm X and Martin Luther King discussion. They all agreed on the facts for a lot of that, but their response to it was different. Booker T. Washington's response was very like, that's all true. I was raised in slavery. Those were terrible things. But we got to move forward or else we're never going to get it forward. And other black leaders were like, we got to do some societal changes to make things better. And I'm not even going to tell you like necessarily what you should agree with, but that was a big discussion because some of it is you can get so caught up in all these things that are absolutely true about oppression. And it can also mean if you focus so much on it that your life doesn't get better because even if it's true. And so some of it is just, I'm speaking from this privileged position, but it's true for almost every person. It's true for your kids. They can complain about something. This coach was unfair. This teacher was unfair. This thing was unfair. And I think we all know as parents, even if they're right, it doesn't help for them to go, you're so right. You're absolutely right. They were unfair. Right, because that'll be better for them for the future. It's not a great analogy for historically, but it's still true.
Yeah, but I don't think it's true, respectfully. I think that when we look at some of our leaders and we look at what stories are told, certain stories and certain leaders get certain credibility. Those are the ones whose stories get pushed into the main narrative. We look at, just to go back to Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois, when we look at the Booker T. Washington position, there are a lot of people that said, well, maybe he's representing the white establishment. And that's the reason why his white adjacency was the reason why this narrative was pushed. And what if it was different? What if W.E.B. Du Bois was the narrative that was pushed? Things may be different now. So I do think that even within our history, for me, it's difficult to talk about what happened in the past because I believe in the Sankofa principle. And as a black person, culturally raised, we believe that you have to understand the past in order to know the future. And so that, and one reason so that you can recognize when people are trying to play in your face, as the young folks say. My God.
Did he get that right?
But I think it's one way to understand that there's certain narratives even throughout history that are pushed. And if we believe that those are the narratives that are the truth, I think that we are, in my opinion, engaging in a bad practice around history. Because there's some reason why those stories are established. There's some reason why we look at the 66 books of the Bible. There's a reason why there's 66 books in the Bible. There could have been other books in the Bible. Why weren't those chosen? And if those were chosen, the narrative could be different. Yeah, for sure. So
I'm happy to talk about the Council of Nicaea after this. Anyone that wants to come around.
So who benefits? Who benefits? So who benefits? Who benefits when we take certain parts of history and push it as a narrative? Who benefits from that? Who has the power to benefit from it?
Oftentimes, it's the state. It's going back to Alex's point too about narratives that are pushed. Oftentimes it is simply the state. There is a reason history and civics education is pushed, and it's generally not because they want to create rebels. It's just not. But more broadly, because history has expanded and can be more diverse than that, like, in terms of you might have to go seek out more diverse narratives than maybe was presented to you as a child in school. But it is there. It is being worked on. Historians are always complicating the narrative. I mean, that's kind of like our job, is to say, oh, you thought that was simple. My poor husband, I'm like, well, actually. And so, it can benefit. So it can benefit different people in different ways. It can benefit culturally, family histories. There are multiple ways, but I do think when we get into the big debates, like you've been bringing up, I mean, honestly, I'll be simple this time. It's the state.
Yeah, and that was one of my questions. Does it protect the people or the systems, right? What is being protected?
Systems.
Okay. And do we have a responsibility as individuals to teach history? Like, I know we talk about schools. We've talked about that a lot tonight. But I mean, I just know a lot of stuff that I learned was orally, right? People teaching me and just sharing. I mean, it was stuff that I learned about that happened down south from my mother and my aunts, right? They lived it. They actually lived it, so they were able to tell me what took place during that time. I think about even with Juneteenth as a federal holiday now. I knew about that before. Some people keep saying it just came up 5 years ago. I'm like, I've known about that because people lived that, right? And so, don't we have a responsibility to teach history and to share our perspectives? Go for it. And then, okay, Jared, Tiffany, Camden, Kevin, 5 minutes all together. So let's go.
I was getting back to on that point and what you said back to the statutes issue. I have like a middle ground on this, which I've just said, like, to me, it's what are these things celebrating? So Thomas Jefferson Middle School in, Jefferson Road in Midland. I don't believe that the people that named that are celebrating that he owned slaves. I think they're celebrating his involvement with the founding of the country. Now, statutes of Southern Confederate generals, it's pretty specific about what they're celebrating. Yeah. So the answer of should our town put this up or continue funding having it, probably not. You're in Virginia, and it's like, we don't agree with that perspective. For me, even as more conservative-minded person, take it down. But I do think people get to, like, the people that are celebrating Christopher Columbus, they're not. Most people aren't in this complicated, how did he treat the natives that were here? They're thinking of even though he never set foot in America, he was this person that was an explorer, and we're celebrating his exploration. So it gets back to me of like, what are people actually celebrating? And if we're debating that, it's a lot better than I'm just going to assume that because you're defending Jefferson being named, one of our schools in town, that it means you support his actions on slavery.
Yeah. And I think, and Tiffany, you go next, I promise. I want to say, I think that sometimes people miss the part on, even if you aren't celebrating that part, don't say it didn't happen, right? And I think that's the part where it kind of becomes problematic is, of course, you may not even know that it took place, but the whole erasure part is really interesting to me. So Tiffany, Camden, right now you guys have 4 minutes.
Okay, you took a word from me. Let me actually add to what you said about almost like acknowledging what happened. It has to do a lot with, if we want to evolve as a nation, we have to make sure we acknowledge things that exist. We cannot evolve where we refuse to acknowledge. Does that make sense to you? Sharing history, honestly, it doesn't weaken the state or any institution. It basically will strengthen it, and it opens up opportunities for structural change. You know what I'm saying? Not just performing, we're performing to include people because we get to the point because we're only performing to say we're including everybody. But there truly has to be a structural change that takes place, and we move from representation to really retention. And also from having access to things where people truly feel like they belong. Yes. And then also taking the community working together. When I say community, I'm talking about parents working with the schools, because there's a lot of pressure that's put on schools to teach everything. There's this trend, and some of you may have seen it on Facebook. Parents are asking their children, like the people like Thomas Jefferson or even like Martin Luther King. Who was Martin Luther King? And the kid's like, I don't know. And another parent asks, who killed Martin Luther King? The kid looked, the parent did not and said, my daddy probably.
That's a whole other
the responsibility should be on us as a community working together as partners. So the parents, you got to teach at home too. Yes. You got to teach history, whether it's your family history, Black history, Hispanic history. You have to teach the history, because you'll get answers like that will embarrass you. Probably my daddy. So if we really want to evolve as a nation, we got to acknowledge what exists and acknowledge the change that needs to take place.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And even if you don't have the capabilities to teach, provide the resources for them to learn. Camden?
I do believe it is our human responsibility to educate ourselves on history. As I said earlier, I've been so grateful to grow up in a very loving household and of educators who have encouraged me to seek out information always. And I think the thing is, as you just said, making those resources available, because I think for assignments for school, I look and I search online, and yes, our school devices are censored, but I want that information. Why should it be hidden if someone is out there trying to reach for it?
I go back and forth on whether or not it's important to share history versus teach history. I operate a museum, and my partner in creativity, who just passed away on Friday, God bless her soul, Naisha Clark Young, we used to go back and forth all the time about, she's an artist, and I'm a curator, and we would go back and forth about the fact there are no words on the walls. And I refused. I got to the point where it's like, I just don't want to put a description on these historical pieces, because it's from my perspective. It's from everything that has shaped me around some of these pieces. Like, I can describe this as a bill of sale for a Negro girl aged 12 sold in 1822. But beyond that, I try not to put any more context in there outside of what this particular object is. In terms of meaning, I'm hoping that they're engaging with the people that they come with, or that, I'm also providing some resources, but that people can kind of engage with some of this on their own. Now, for those people who ask more questions, I'm able to, I do feel that I'm able to go into a more teaching mode versus just sharing and making objects available. But I do think we have to figure out that piece around, is it appropriate for me to share this or to teach this?